The elevator doors opened, and my brother-in-law looked at me the way he always did, like I was something that had wandered in from the parking lot. "She's with me," he said to the front desk attendant, not even glancing back. "Just my sister-in-law. She can wait in the lobby." I didn't say anything. I just smiled, reached into my bag, and pulled out my badge. The attendant's eyes went wide. She straightened in her chair like someone had pulled a string through the top of her head. "Dr. Hartley, we've been expecting you. The boardroom is ready. Shall I let them know you've arrived?" My brother-in-law turned around slowly, and for the first time in 11 years, he had absolutely nothing to say. "I should tell you how we got here. My name is Vivian Hartley. I'm 32 years old, and I spent most of my adult life being the quiet one. Not shy exactly, more like strategic. I learned early that in certain rooms, the smartest thing you can do is let people underestimate you. Let them get comfortable. Let them keep talking. My sister married Hugh Calloway 9 years before any of this happened. He was the kind of man who filled a room. Loud laugh, firm handshake, the sort of guy who remembered your name at parties and somehow made you feel like that was a gift he was giving you. My sister Nadine adored him. Still does, as far as I know. I never trusted him. Not because of anything he did at first, just a feeling. The way he'd redirect a conversation when I was mid-sentence. The way he introduced me at family dinners. "This is Vivian, Nadine's little sister. She's still figuring things out." I was 23 and halfway through my residency at the time. "Our mother thought I was being too sensitive. Hugh is wonderful," she'd say. "You just need to give him a chance." I gave him 11 years. The problems really started when my dad got sick. It was the spring I turned 27. The year the whole city of Ottawa still smelled like the tail end of a long winter that wouldn't let go. My father was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition. The kind that doesn't kill you right away, just takes pieces of you slowly, the way erosion works on riverbanks. He needed full-time care eventually, and our parents' house in Kanata was going to have to be sold to cover the costs. Hugh had opinions about all of it. He was, as he liked to remind everyone at every family gathering, a financial advisor. He managed portfolios for high-net-worth clients, or so he said. He drove a BMW. He kept a spreadsheet for Christmas gifts. He knew what everything was worth, and he wasn't shy about saying so. The house should be liquidated quickly, he told my mother at the kitchen table, like she wasn't sitting in the home she'd lived in for 30 years. "Market's going to soften in the next quarter. Better to move now and put the proceeds into a managed account. I can handle that for you." My mother nodded slowly. She was exhausted. She was scared. She trusted people who sounded certain. I sat across the table and kept my mouth closed. Not because I had nothing to say. Because I was calculating. Here's what you didn't know about me and what my family, bless them, had never quite understood. I didn't go into general practice. After my residency, I completed a fellowship in health systems policy and then went to work as a consultant for the federal government. Over 5 years, I'd worked my way into a role that required security clearance. The kind that doesn't come up in conversation at holiday dinners. The kind that means when you walk into certain buildings in Ottawa, people stand up differently. I didn't talk about it, not because I was hiding it. Just because I'd learned a long time ago that broadcasting your credentials is what people do when they're insecure. I didn't need Hugh to know what I did. I needed to watch what he was doing. And what he was doing, slowly and methodically, was positioning himself as the authority in every conversation that involved money, decisions, or my parents' future. He'd started ceasing himself on emails between my mother and her estate lawyer. He'd offered to simplify the family finances by consolidating accounts under an advisory structure he managed. When I raised a question at one of these kitchen table meetings, something about fiduciary obligations and fee disclosures, Hugh looked at me the way you look at a golden retriever who's gotten into the recycling bin. "Vivian," he said, patient as a man reading to a child, "I appreciate the curiosity, but there are a lot of moving parts here that require expertise." My mother looked at her hands. Nadine touched Hugh's arm like he'd just said something kind. I drove home that night and called my colleague Marcus. No, Not Marcus. James. I called James, who worked in regulatory oversight and had once described Hugh's farm to me at a government mixer as flagged but not yet followed up on. I asked him what he needed to open a file. I want to be clear about something. I didn't do what I did for revenge. Or maybe a small part of me did, and I'm not ashamed of that small part. But mostly I did it because I watched my father, a man who'd spent 35 years as a civil engineer, who'd coached my hockey team when I was 9, who cried at my medical school graduation like I'd hung the moon. I watched him sign documents he didn't fully understand while you stood in the corner of the room looking pleased with himself. That was the thing that moved me past calculating and into action. I spent 3 months compiling what I needed. Not dramatically, no secret meetings, no stolen files, just reading, asking questions, using the access I had in my professional capacity to pull publicly available regulatory records that, if you knew what you were looking for, told a very clear story. Hugh's firm had 3 client complaints lodged with the MFDA over the past 6 years. 2 had been settled quietly, 1 was still open. None of the clients were named, but the complaint patterns were familiar. Elderly investors, complicated fee structures, recommendations to consolidate assets into instruments that benefited the advisor more than the client. I put together a 30-page brief and sent it to the appropriate oversight body with my professional credentials attached. Then I waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Not because I doubted what I'd found, but because life kept happening in the meantime. My dad had 2 hospitalizations that winter. I drove to Kanata every second weekend and sat with my mother while you held court at the dining room table, explaining how he was managing everything beautifully. One evening in February, there was a family dinner, the kind where my aunt and 2 cousins came, and everyone brought wine and pretended everything was fine. Hugh had a few glasses and got louder the way he always did, and somewhere between the main course and dessert, he started talking about my career. Vivienne's in government, he said with a particular tone that means isn't that quaint. She does consulting, policy stuff. He waved a hand like he was describing weather. It's steady work. Good pension, I'm sure. He smiled at me. Not exactly changing the world, but somebody's got to do it. My aunt laughed politely. My cousin looked at her plate. I ate my roast chicken and said, more wine. Nadine caught my eye across the table. Something moved in her face. Not quite an apology. More like she'd gotten so used to looking away that she'd forgotten there was something to look at. The call came on a Thursday in late March. I was in a meeting on the 8th floor of a building I can't name. In a room with people whose job titles I'm not going to put in a YouTube video, and my phone buzzed with a number I recognized. I stepped out into the hallway and answered. The investigator on the other end was professionally neutral, the way people in oversight positions are trained to be. He thanked me for the brief. He told me the file had been escalated. He said there would be a review process, and that as the complainant, I'd be notified of outcomes, but that given the nature of the information and my professional standing, they wanted to discuss a few things directly. I stood in that hallway in a building in downtown Ottawa, and I let myself feel it for exactly 30 seconds. The long winter of staying quiet, the dinners, the hand-waving, steady work, good pension. Then I went back into the meeting. I'll tell you about the lobby because that's where it landed. It was a Tuesday in May. Hugh had a meeting at a financial services firm downtown, a prospective client, big account, the kind of thing he'd been building toward for months. He'd mentioned it at Easter with the energy of a man who believed he was about to close something important. I had a meeting at the same building, different floor, different world. I didn't plan it that way. The timing was what it was. But when I walked in through the revolving doors and saw him standing at the front desk with his laptop bag and his BMW keys in his hand, I felt something settle in my chest. Quiet and certain. He saw me and, for a moment, looked surprised. Then the familiar ease came back. Vivienne, what are you doing here? Meeting, I said. He nodded the way people nod when they've already stopped listening. Turned back to the desk. She's with me, he told the attendant, some instinct overriding his logic. Just my sister-in-law. She can wait in the lobby. I let a half-second pass. Then I reached into my bag, took out my badge, and placed it on the desk. The attendant, a young woman in a grey blazer who had probably seen a lot in that lobby, looked at the badge, looked at me, and straightened like I said, like someone had pulled a string through the top of her head. Dr. Hartley, of course. The Deputy Minister's office confirmed your 11 o'clock. I'll let them know you're here. Can I arrange anything for you while you wait? I thanked her. I asked for water. Hugh didn't move for a long moment. I could feel him trying to locate himself in the situation, the way you do when the floor shifts under you in a way you weren't expecting. Deputy Minister, he said finally. Not a question, just the words. I said. I sat down in one of the chairs near the window and took out my phone. His meeting, I later found out, did not go well. The prospective client had done their due diligence in the weeks prior and come across information from the ongoing regulatory review. These things have a way of getting around in certain circles in a city like Ottawa where everyone who matters knows someone who knows someone. Hugh left the building 40 minutes later with the same laptop bag and a different expression on his face. I didn't call Nadine that day. I thought about it. I thought about a lot of things on the drive home. The kitchen table in Kanata, the roast chicken dinner, all those moments I'd sat quietly and let him take up all the space in the room. She called me 3 days later. She knew about the investigation by then. Hugh had told her in a version of events that I'm sure cast him in the most sympathetic light available. She was upset. I expected that. She asked me why I hadn't come to her first, why I'd gone around her, why I hadn't trusted the family to handle it. I listened until she was done. He was handling Dad's finances, I said, without full disclosure, without proper consent, with a complaint file that had been open for 2 years. Silence. He could have taken everything they had left, I said, and he was going to. More silence. The kind that means something is shifting, slowly the way ice moves in April. I didn't want to be right, I said. I want you to know that. She hung up. She called back 4 hours later and cried, which is the closest Nadine has ever gotten to saying I'm sorry in 32 years of being my sister. My father's care costs are now managed by a certified financial planner who my mother chose herself. After I sat with her and walked her through what to look for, what questions to ask, what red flags sound like when they're wearing a nice suit and driving a BMW. My parents' house sold at a reasonable price, at a time my mother was ready, and the proceeds are in a straightforward account that she understands completely. Hugh and Nadine are still married. I don't know if that will hold. That's not something I can fix or undo, and I've made peace with that. What I know is this. I sat quietly at a lot of tables. I let a lot of things slide. I kept calculating while someone I was supposed to trust treated me like furniture and treated my parents like opportunity. And then one Tuesday in May, in a lobby in downtown Ottawa, I put my badge on a desk. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a speech. I didn't need to. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let the room go quiet and wait for people to understand what they're looking at. My father came to my apartment for dinner last month. He's slower now. The illness has taken some of what it was going to take. But he sat at my kitchen table and ate the butter chicken I made and told me about a documentary he'd watched about civil engineers who built the Rado Canal. His eyes went bright, the way they used to when I was 9, and he was explaining to me, very seriously, how a lock system worked. After dinner, he held my hand for a moment before he stood up to leave. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I think he knew. I think he's always known, in the way that fathers know things about their daughters that they don't always say out loud. I walked him to the elevator, and when the doors closed, I stood in the hallway of my apartment building in the city I chose, in the life I built, and I let myself feel all of it, the years of quiet, the long winters, the dinners and the dismissals and the particular loneliness of being underestimated by someone sitting at the same table as you. And then I went back inside, washed the dishes, and made myself a cup of tea. I used to think staying quiet was the same as being weak. For a long time, I think my family believed that too, that because I didn't argue at the dinner table, because I didn't raise my voice when Hugh waved his hands through my sentences like they were smoke, I must not have had anything worth saying. What I know now is that there's a difference between silence and surrender. The silence I chose wasn't empty. It was full of watching, reading, understanding exactly what was happening and what it was going to cost the people I loved if I did nothing. That's the thing nobody tells you about integrity. It doesn't always look like courage in the moment. Sometimes it looks like eating roast chicken and pouring someone more wine. Sometimes it looks like driving home alone and making a phone call. The act that protects someone rarely announces itself. My father spent 35 years building things that held weight: bridges, drainage systems, structures that had to be right or they'd fail. He taught me, without meaning to, that careful work done out of sight is still real work, that what holds doesn't always show. I think I became the person I am because of him, and I think what happened with Hugh was, in some way, me learning to apply what my father built into me. He was intelligent in certain ways, but intelligence without honesty is just a tool for taking things. He understood financial instruments, fee structures, the art of sounding certain to people who are frightened. What he didn't understand, what I don't think he ever had to reckon with before, is that competence has a way of surfacing. You can only keep something underwater so long before it comes up. I don't feel triumphant about what happened to him. The investigation, the lost client, whatever is happening inside his marriage now. None of that gives me satisfaction the way I thought it might when I was compiling that brief at my kitchen table at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday in January. What I feel is something quieter, more like relief, like the weight of watching someone walk towards something dangerous and finally being able to say, not this time. The hardest thing wasn't building the case. It was the years before that, the years of being underestimated and choosing, again and again, not to let it make me smaller. That takes something that I can only describe as a kind of stubborn persistence, not resilience in the motivational poster sense. Just the daily decision to keep going, keep learning, keep being exactly what you are, even when the room you're sitting in doesn't see it yet. My mother chose her own financial planner. She asked good questions. She understood the answers. Watching her do that, watching her take that back, was worth more than any lobby moment ever could have been. I went home that Tuesday and made tea. The dishes were done. The city outside was still doing what Ottawa does in May, that tentative warmth that might hold or might not. I sat by the window for a while and thought about my dad explaining lock systems to me when I was 9. How patient he was. How certain that if you understood the mechanism, you could work with it. He was right. He's always been right about that.